This is the Music History In-Depth podcast for September the 4th through the 10th. On this week's show, American Idol gets huge, one of the most popular duos of all time reunites on a telethon, and we say happy birthday to a few legends including the Queen Bey. In 2002, producer Simon Fuller convinced Fox Television to try something new for American television. He was going around town trying to sell a reality music competition show, with the winner getting a recording contract. The idea wasn't really new. Fuller based his idea on a popular British show called Pop Idol, but America had not had a music competition show on television in quite some time. In fact, the last one was the 1980s mainstay Star Search with Ed McMahon, but that was in weekend daytime syndication. Nevertheless, Fox bit on the idea and decided to make it a summer show. That wasn't very encouraging to Fuller, since summer at the time was basically a dumping ground for reruns. It would occasionally have a breakout hit like Survivor, but the conventional wisdom at the time was that no one watched television in the summer. The first season had music executive Simon Cowell, record producer and one-time bassist for the rock group Journey during its Raised on Radio tour, Mr. Randy Jackson, and choreographer and early 90s singing sensation, Miss Paula Abdul. The hosts for the show were a radio DJ named Ryan Seacrest and a comedian named Brian Dunkelman. More on him later. The show debuted on Fox Television on June 11, 2002. The show became an immediate hit. Each week, the audience grew and grew. On September 4, 2002, the show held its championship round live with a studio audience to huge TV ratings. With 58% of the vote, a then-unknown Kelly Clarkson beat runner-up Justin Guarini. The other top 10 finalists in order of finishing were Nikki McRibbon in number 3, Tamara Gray at number 4, R.J. Helton at number 5, Christina Christian at number 6, Ryan Starr at number 7, A.J. Gill at number 8, Jim Veranos at number 9, and E.J. Day at number 10. The show itself would become a staple of American television and pop culture for 16 years. It would make multimillionaires and stars of everybody associated with it. It would also inspire a lot of competition shows, both musical like The Voice and X Factor, and non-musical like Top Chef, etc., etc., etc. The show would also create a lot of controversy. Back to Brian Dunkelman. Right after the end of the first season, Dunkelman quit the show right before he could be fired. Also, right before the show made everyone associated with it mega rich, which unfortunately has given Dunkelman the nickname the Pete Best of American Idol. Anyway, Dunkelman said he quit because he didn't like the way the producers treated the contestants, doing everything from staging fights between them to putting fake tears in their eyes for tight camera shots of them crying. In short, much like a lot of reality TV shows, he said that it was faked. What couldn't be faked, though, was the amount of talent that was coming out of the show, at least in the first few seasons. You had Kelly Clarkson, Jennifer Hudson, Carrie Underwood, Katharine McPhee, Chris Daughtry, Adam Lambert, and Fantasia, just a few of the names who made it big and got their start on American Idol. The show did routinely become a victim of its own success, as young female voters routinely voted off better qualified female contestants in favor of cute male contestants. Plus, don't forget about the guy who badly sang Ricky Martin's hit song She Bangs and became a singing sensation when his audition was shown on one episode. That was proof that you didn't even need to be good to be on this show and get famous. Soon, people were purposely being bad in hopes that they would be shown on the first few elimination audition shows. Also, think about this. Name anyone who won Idol in the past 6 seasons or so. I bet you can't. nor can you name a winner on any of the other competition shows like The Voice or X Factor or any of the other shows. They've all become kinda disposable, unfortunately. This isn't a dig at those types of shows, by the way. I mean, shows like that have been around for decades. Any Gen X person will tell you about Star Search with Ed McMahon. That show produced Leanne Rimes, Sawyer Brown, Shanice, and Beyonce, whose group Girl Time lost to a group called Skeleton Crew when she was on. Girl Time ended up becoming Destiny's Child, by the way. Arthur Godfrey, back in the 1950s, had a show called Arthur Godfrey's Talent Scouts. He found talent like, among others, Miss Patsy Cline, also Tony Bennett, and a few others. Now Idol's back on a different network. It seems to be doing okay, but nothing will beat its first season when it stormed out of the gate and become a cultural phenomenon, reaching its zenith during its first season finale, which was held on September the 4th, 2002. Before we continue, we'd like to tell you about the Music History Today podcast, where we go over the events that happened on that particular day in music history. The Music History Today podcast drops every single day, including weekends, on this podcast network. Now, back to the Music History In-Depth podcast. Our next story is about a reunion of a duo who had its heyday in the 1940s and 1950s. In 1945, Dean Martin was a nightclub singer. Jerry Lewis was a comedian whose routine was to lip-sync to records. They decided to team up together when the scheduled singer didn't show up one night in 1946 at the 500 Club in Atlantic City. At first, their show wasn't good, so they started winging it and did vaudeville and slapstick comedy. The act worked, and then they became mainstays at the club. Word spread around, and soon they were doing the nightclub circuit. Lewis would constantly interrupt Martin's singing, and Martin would get very angry and chase Lewis all over the place. Hollywood came calling, and that's when things really took off for the duo. Martin and Lewis had a radio show which paid them very well, and that led to them doing some movies. All of this made them extremely popular. Check out footage online of them hanging out of the windows at the Paramount Theater in Times Square in New York City, while thousands of women screamed at them from the streets. These guys were huge. Unfortunately, like a lot of partnerships, things get strained. Martin grew tired of being Lewis's straight man to Lewis's crazy antics, so they broke up rather angrily on July 25th, 1956, exactly 10 years to the day of their first performance together. Martin, of course, went on to have a huge career of his own in the movies and also with a group of guys who did a crazy nightclub antics of their own called the Rat Pack. You may have heard of them. Frank Sinatra, Sammy Davis Jr., Joey Bishop, etc., etc. Meanwhile, Lewis went on to become a movie star in films like The Nutty Professor and The Bellboy. Lewis would also become involved in a charity organization. Back in 1951, he and Martin participated in the first telethon for a cardiac hospital. Lewis continued to do telethons for various causes, and then, on September 4th and 5th, 1966, he started hosting the Labor Day Telethon to benefit the Muscular Dystrophy Association. The show would become a Labor Day staple until Lewis was dismissed from the association rather controversially in 2011. Lewis raised hundreds of millions of dollars for the MDA over those decades with his trusty sidekick, Ed McMahon. And when I say hundreds of millions, it's probably closer to about $1 billion over those decades. It was during one of these telethon broadcasts that Lewis got a surprise. On September 6, 1976, Lewis's good friend, Frank Sinatra, was on the telethon when he stopped performing for a minute and asked Lewis if he could bring a friend out who wanted to do a song. Lewis said sure, and out walked Dean Martin from the wings of the stage. The audience gave them a standing ovation. The two old friends hugged. They hadn't really spoken to each other in just over 20 years at that point. They joked around on stage for a few minutes in an awkward but very touching moment. And after the on-stage reunion, they apparently talked and kept in touch until Dean's death in 1995. Lewis passed away, by the way, in 2017. The reunion of two of the biggest stars of the early 1950s took place on September 6, 1976, on the Jerry Lewis Labor Day telethon for muscular dystrophy. On to some birthdays for the week. The first one's legacy is already clearly being defined. She was born on September the 4th, 1981. She started out performing in singing and dancing competitions. However, she would first make her name as part of a girl group that was managed by her father. After the group broke up in 2006, she found further success as a solo artist, selling over 100 million copies to go along with the 60 million copies she sold as part of that girl group. Even her sister is talented. Also, her sister has a mean kick and a good right hook. Just ask the woman's husband. She is part of a Hollywood power couple who together are worth more than $1 billion. The ex-member of Destiny's Child with a singing and acting career for the ages, Jay-Z's much better and more talented half. All hail the Beehive. It's Beyonce's birthday, born September the 4th, 1981. Otis Redding was born on September 9, 1941. He has been called one of the greatest singers of popular music ever. He was a member of Little Richard's backup band, the Upsetters, for a time, and also Johnny Jenkins's band, the Pine Toppers. He started recording as a solo artist in 1962 with Stax Records. His first single was the classic These Arms of Mine in 1962. In 1964, he put out his debut album, Pain in My Heart. What followed was an incredible amount of album and touring production. In fact, as far as touring went, he toured the South and Europe continuously for the better part of the decade, all the while recording song after song. In 1964 and 1965, Otis put out 3 albums. These Arms of Mine was 1964. In March of 1965, he put out his second album, The Great Otis Redding Sings Soul Ballads. That album had Otis's first huge hit, Mr. Pitiful. While on tour to support this album, Otis started working on the songs that would become part of his next album. He decided that most of the songs would be cover versions of soul songs. 3 of the original songs were co-written by him. I've Been Loving You Too Long, Respect, and Old Man Trouble. Respect would be slowed down and covered by Aretha Franklin's classic version. The entire album was recorded in 3 days. It started on April 19th, then finished on July 9th and 10th. He was backed up by the members of the Memphis Horns, the Bar Keys, and Booker T and the MGs. That album, Otis Redding Sings Soul, was released on September 15, 1965. Although the album only made it to number 75 on the Billboard Albums charts, 3 of the singles became top 40 hits: I've Been Loving You Too Long, Respect, and Shake. The album is considered one of the greatest albums of all time, even though most of it is cover songs. After Otis blew, Otis's career started going better and better. By 1967, he was hitting his stride, and after years of being the workhorse for Stax Records, he was finally getting his due. His gravelly vocals plus his sex appeal and energetic performances were winning over audiences worldwide. He started off by breaking through at the Monterey Rock Festival in 1967. That's the same festival who saw The Who and Jimi Hendrix rise to prominence in America. Aretha Franklin made a hit out of his song Respect that year. Redding was getting some respect of his own with songs like Try a Little Tenderness. He was starting to achieve crossover stardom finally. On December 10, 1967, Redding left a Memphis recording studio having worked on the song Sitting on the Dock of the Bay, what would end up being his biggest hit. He didn't have time to finish recording the lyrics for the end of the song, so he whistled the melody intending to finish recording the lyrics once he got back from a trip. He needed to get to a TV performance in Cleveland, Ohio, and then a concert in Madison, Wisconsin, so he took a private plane. As the plane approached the runway in Madison, it unfortunately crashed into a small lake, killing Otis and all but one person on the plane. Otis Redding was 36 years old. The song Sitting on the Dock of the Bay was released after his death and became the first posthumous song to ever hit number 1 on the Billboard Singles Chart. The legendary soul man, rock and roll Hall of Famer, Otis Redding, born September 9th, 1941. This man was born Farouk Bulsara on the island of Zanzibar, East Africa, on September 5th, 1946. Back in the late 1960s, while in art college, young Farouk Bulsara became friends with bassist Tim Staffel, who was in a band at the time called Smile. Farouk became a fan of the band and ended up joining them when Staffel left the band to form another band. Farouk joined the band and did 2 name changes. The first was that he persuaded the rest of the members of the band, guitarist Brian May and drummer Roger Taylor, to change their name from Smile to Queen. The second was that Farouk Bulsara changed his name to Freddie Mercury. Queen played with different bassists for a couple of years until they found the perfect bassist in John Deacon. In 1973, the band signed a record deal and released their debut album, Queen. The critics liked the progressive metal sound of the band, but the public didn't find the album, even with the now well-known lead single from that album, Keep Yourself Alive. Their second album, Queen 2, found success, both with critics and the general public. That album had the classic 7 Seas of Rye. In 1974, the band released Sheer Heart Attack, which gave them even bigger success with songs like Killer Queen, Now I'm Here, and Stone Cold Crazy. Album number 4 came around in 1975. A Night at the Opera became a worldwide smash. The album had the hits Love of My Life, You're My Best Friend, and another song that would chart 3 times in America, hitting the top 10 all 3 times. The second time with the help of a movie about 2 kids with a cable access TV show, and the third time with the help of an Academy Award-winning performance. According to historians, some of the ideas for the song Bohemian Rhapsody were formulated in the late 1960s, especially the beginning part where the singer of the song talks about the fact that he just killed a man. The song, all planned out by Freddie beforehand, starts with a 49-second intro, then goes into an almost 2-minute ballad, then Brian May's 25-second guitar solo, then the 1-minute opera that everyone and their grandmother loves singing, then a quick little 47-second rock portion, and has a 1-minute ending. All totaled, it's a 5-minute, 55-second mini rock opera about a guy who accidentally killed a man, sold his soul to the devil, then called God to help save him. That's the opera portion in the center. The band started recording the song in late August 1975 and took almost 3 weeks to record it. They had rehearsed it 3 weeks beforehand. They layered over 100 different tracks onto the song, but Brian May's guitar solo is all him, 1 track only. The record label, as you can imagine, was not pleased with a 6-minute song. They thought it didn't fit into the cookie-cutter 4 minutes or less corporate radio world, so the band took the song to Capitol Radio DJ Kenny Everett, who played it on air. He teased it first, though, by playing little bits of it until the public wanted more. It then got picked up by a lot of other radio stations, and after that, Queen's record label, Elektra, released the song on Halloween, October 31st, 1975. The song Bohemian Rhapsody became a huge hit, especially in England where it went to number 1. In America, it went top 10, number 9 to be precise, in its initial run. The song also sold over 30 million copies worldwide to date. The music video that was made for the song is also considered a template of how music videos were made back in the 1970s. The song has been popularized a few more times. The first was during the unfortunate early death of Freddie Mercury from complications from AIDS in 1991, when it finally hit number 1 in America when it was released with the song These Are the Days of Our Lives as a double A-side single in late 1991. The second was when a movie called Wayne's World, about 2 guys who had a cable access TV show, used the song in the now famous headbanging scene in the car. The third was the past few years when the band's biopic Bohemian Rhapsody, with a Best Actor Academy Award winning performance by Rami Malek as the late great Freddie Mercury, took the song back into the top 10 in the UK. After that, the band became dominant through the late 1970s into the early 1980s, with albums A Day at the Races, News of the World, Jazz, The Game, The Works, and A Kind of Magic. They also had hit soundtracks for the movies Flash Gordon, Flash, Savior of the Universe. Loved that album. Also Iron Eagle and Highlander. Of course, if you saw the movie, then you know that the band's popularity started to go down in America as New Wave took over the industry. As a matter of fact, even though a bunch of their songs are considered classics and are classic rock radio staples in America, those songs were not hugely popular when they were originally released, much like a lot of songs these days that are considered to be some of the greatest songs ever written. Regardless of how they were perceived commercially and on the charts in America, they were still a big touring draw and were hugely popular in England, continuously racking up top 10 albums and singles. See their legendary performance at Live Aid as proof of their popularity in the UK. Freddie's health started to deteriorate from the effects of the AIDS virus as he fronted the band's final couple of albums in the early 1990s, and you can see the beating his body took in the band's video for the song These Are the Days of Our Lives. Watching him will leave more than a few tears in your eyes, trust me. After Freddie's death on November 24, 1991, the band held a tribute concert at Wembley Stadium, site of their legendary Live Aid performance. Then, the group marched on with different lead singers, including Robbie Williams from Take That for a Time, before finally landing on American Idol contestant Adam Lambert. And they've been touring ever since, although bassist John Deacon retired from the band in 1997, but is still sort of a member of the band. He does a lot of the business side of it all. Queen are one of the biggest selling musical artists of all time, with claimed sales of up to 300 million copies, and are the third best-selling band in England. Rolling Stone voted Freddie the second greatest frontman of all time and the 18th greatest singer of all time, while voting the band the 52nd greatest artist of all time. Queen put out 14 studio albums during Freddie's tenure as frontman, along with 2 live albums, 2 greatest hits albums, and 2 box sets. There have been a bunch of all those different types of albums that have been released since Freddie passed away in order to cash in on the group's legacy. Of the albums that were released while Freddie was alive, 5 hit the top 10 in America, with 1980's The Game hitting number 1. Memory serves, that's the one with Another One Bites the Dust on it. In the UK, it's a completely different story, with 17 albums hitting the top 10, including 9 hitting the top spot. As far as singles that were released while Freddie was still alive, 53 of those were released, with 5 hitting the top 10 in America, including Crazy Little Thing Called Love, Another One Bites the Dust, and the aforementioned 1991 re-release of Bohemian Rhapsody hitting number 1. In the UK, a completely different story yet again, as they had 20 songs hit the top 10, including 4 number 1s. The life and times of the iconic superstar, the legend. Are you ready, Freddie? Mr. Freddie Mercury, born September 5th, 1946. Tim Bergling was born on September 8th, 1989 in Sweden. Tim decided to get into DJing due to his brother, who was already a DJ. By the time he was 18, Tim was signed to a record label. He started working under the guidance of DJ and producer Laidback Luke. He then struck out on his own as a producer and remixer. In 2010, at the age of 21, Tim tried to set up his social media accounts through MySpace, but found out that his name was already taken. Ah, MySpace. Remember MySpace? That was a good time. Anyway, Tim needed a stage name, so he took the name from the Buddhist name for the lowest level of hell, Avicii, and added an extra I to it, and the legend of Avicii was born. In 2010, Avicii released his first big hit, Seek Bromance, which went top 10 all throughout Europe. In 2011, he put out the song Levels. That song went top 10 in Europe and was also nominated for a Best Dance Recording Grammy. It is also considered to be the greatest EDM song of all time, according to many of those greatest of lists. In 2012, he and David Guetta put out the song Sunshine. That song was nominated for a Best Dance Recording Grammy as well, Avicii's second year in a row. He then tried to stop release of Leona Lewis's song Collide because it used his song Fade into Darkness without permission. That's a no-no. Avicii started doing festival DJing, including a very memorable set at the 2012 Ultra Miami Music Festival, where he debuted new songs with Madonna and Lenny Kravitz. From there, Avicii went on a roll. He was the first DJ to do a concert at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. In 2013, he released the album True. That album had the song that would turn him into an international superstar, Wake Me Up with Aloe Blacc, which spent 14 weeks at the top of Billboard's dance charts. His follow-up single, Hey Brother, was almost as popular. In 2015, he released the album Stories, which he had teased at festivals all throughout 2014. Throughout the next 3 years, Avicii continued to put out music and collaborate with other artists. However, his festival and club DJing were beginning to take a toll on him, so he retired from doing them. It turned out that his mental health and stress issues went back to at least 2014 when he was hospitalized and had to miss his closing set at one of the Ultra Music Festivals. He would continue to fight with mental health issues until April 20th, 2018, when he passed away in Oman. While this was a tragedy, he may have, in a way, saved some people's lives by getting them to focus on their own mental health. For instance, Hardwell, San Holo, and Zhu all stopped touring for a little while to focus on themselves, which is never a bad thing. Unfortunately, his girlfriend at the time, Emily Goldberg, also passed away on April 3rd, 2024 at the age of 34 from a pulmonary embolism. Sad, very sad. Unlike a lot of people, I personally do not consider Avicii to be a legend. However, I respect what he did, even though I was never personally a huge fan of his work. And if I ever have to hear Wake Me Up again, that song drives me nuts. I'm sorry. He wasn't the first to put EDM and country music together. That honor actually goes to the Swedish group The Rednecks back in 1994 with the song Cotton Eye Joe, for all you Gen Xers out there. But while putting the two genres together didn't become a trend after Rednecks did it, Sure did become a trend after Avicii did it. In fact, without Avicii's skills for combining country music, folk music, and EDM, and they were multiple skills, I assure you, you definitely would not have the current crop of country/EDM artists out there collabing together, like combining Florida Georgia Line with virtually every EDM artist on the planet. The late, great Tim Bergling, a.k.a. EDM DJ and producer Avicii, born September 8th, 1989. And that is it for the Music History In-Depth podcast for September 4th through the 10th. Thank you very, very much for listening and or watching if you are watching this on YouTube or Spotify.